Talk to me about the, really long-term vision, 10 plus years from now. Where does this go and kind of how does it evolve?
Yeah, when I get asked questions like that, it's so tempting for me to just be like, "Well, we all live in the secret citadel, obviously." No, it's a really interesting question because it really depends what happens to the world. Like, if the world changes over the next 5 to 10 years dramatically, so I think it's changed pretty dramatically in the last 8 months. But like, look over the next like decade. What are the trends you think are going to occur globally? And so one of those trends, as I was saying, is what is going to be the role of nation states versus corporations? What does that mean for self sovereignty and these decentralized networks? My thesis has always been that we're going to see more and more of a pull to these sort of user centric networks that are user owned, user controlled, not in an isolating way, not in like I Tor am alone, but just like I Tor as an individual contributing within this community and this context now have more ownership and more control of the organizations that I choose to use on a daily basis. So if that's a trend we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years globally, I know that secret networks going to have a huge role to play in that. But if we just take like the world of today, and much like it used to be like, if people had thought about what's the Henry Ford quote or whatever, he was like, if you'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, kind of a thing. So let's take that for a second. You take the world of today, and we just say, well, where can secret network plug into like the enterprise world today? I would say privacy is one of the key things that's preventing enterprise adoption of the public blockchain ecosystem. So even just looking in the next few years, thinking about how can secret networks start onboarding more of these enterprises into our universe. And like there's so much that you can do with secret network just around like secure data sharing. If you're a bank with branches in multiple countries and you need to share user data securely across, international lines because you're doing some sort of fraud detection algorithm, like what a like what a simple like real world use case, but possible with our network. You don't have to go into like a decentralized lending platform with sushi farming or whatever's in vogue these days. Like that's just like a regular real world use case. Or like, for example, healthcare. Since we're in the middle of a pandemic, Enigma built this product called safe trace, and it's privacy preserving contact tracing. And contact tracing was a big topic earlier this year, thinking like if I've been in contact with an infected individual, I want to know. At the same time, I don't want to tell everybody in the world my infection status. I don't want to tell the government exactly where I'm located at all times. So Enigma built this POC to be able to say, here's a way to do secure contact tracing. And they're actually now working with Intel to like get that scaled out and bring it to market in a more robust sense. Things like that can be deployed on secret network, right? Or they could be deployed like privately as well. But I think that applications like that are much more useful, and in the long run, probably the way that we all want to be going, like those are the kinds of applications that you want to be decentralized, community owned, and so on, so that you can ensure that they're not held in the hands of like a single government that could misuse that data. So there's the like 10-year vision of like, is the world going to collapse? I don't know. But even if it doesn't, there's a ton of ways that I think this technology is relevant today that I can't wait to get started, building, just because it'll help expand what's possible with these technologies versus the insular world we've lived in for the past few years.
What needs to happen, kind of outside of your own efforts, right? In terms of the network and the community, to facilitate this or accelerate it, right? So, what are like the macro forces or things that can be tailwinds to get there faster?
Well, I would say that education is a huge piece of this, and not just education of end users, but mostly education of the governments and enterprises, who to date really don't show any concrete understanding of how a lot of this stuff works. I would say education also of tax systems and the IRS and things like that. Like, if people start to understand, like, there's no way to put our crazy square peg crypto universe in the round holes of traditional regulation. Like, we're not out here to do anything crazy. Obviously, some people are, but and to take advantage of people. Like, privacy is kind of the opposite. We're here to protect people. If we can help the governments and enterprises and regulators of the world sort of understand that privacy is about protecting the same people that they're trying to protect, and we get the tailwind of that sort of support and adoption from various entities all over the world, I think that would go a huge way towards supporting like our reach to try to onboard like the long tail of users onto these decentralized applications. So long as they see it as a direct threat maybe to their authority, it becomes a lot more impossible. And I think that there is, a tendency in the crypto space to position ourselves against the traditional world and say, like, okay, we're external, we're revolutionaries, we have to be, reactive to everything else that's going on in the world. And I just don't think we'll ever get global adoption if that's our attitude. And the reason we have to have an attitude adjustment is we can't allow ourselves to be left out of the conversation, because if you leave it up to the surveillance states of the world, like, we will end up in the dystopia that we don't like. And if we're just going to bury our heads in the sand and try to say we're going to build a parallel universe, we don't need the regulators to understand, we don't need the enterprises to understand, then they're going to build something without us too. And then at the end of the day, we live in a meat space. Like, we're going to have to live in their world. So unless we learn to work together and play nice with the rest of the world, until we can all start living in virtual reality paradises, like, we have to understand that this has real world consequence, and we have a responsibility to make sure the real world that's getting built is the one that we want to live in.
What do you think the things that could happen that would change your mind in terms of this is where we're going?
In terms of this is where we're going, when I'm saying, like, which part? The part where I'm hopeful that everything works out for the best and we do integrate with normal society, or the part where I'm wrong and everything burns down?
The idea that you have of like, hey, the world is going in the wrong direction. What
Hmm.
could happen that would change your mind on that?
Yeah, honestly, what I want to see is world leaders. Whether you're a leader of corporations, or whether you're a leader of a financial institution, or a leader of a country, people stepping up and saying, I see the value in these technologies for the people I am responsible to. Like, if you're in a financial institution, it's like, we have investors, we have people who have, like, given us their capital protect. Like, for people like that to say, like, Bitcoin is now my treasury asset, that goes a long way. For somebody who runs a government to be able to say, we are working with the creators of these decentralized technologies to build these privacy preserving applications for our citizens, because we believe this is the best way to protect our citizens. Like, people listen to people in positions of authority. And right now, when we look at the world, I see a lot of people in positions of authority that I don't really want to listen to at all, because they just don't understand the fundamentals of the technologies maybe that they're talking about. But also, a lot of them just don't seem to have the best interests of the people they're supposed to protect in their mind. If we get to a point in the world where we have had some sort of, like, on the ground revolution, and now our governments do seem to reflect the will of users, or our enterprises, our corporations do seem to exist to protect users, and here's where I think, or I hope, Apple's moving in the right direction versus a Facebook. Like, if that's the trend of the world, if we start seeing leaders step up and say, we know this is best for our users, then I'll feel a lot more hopeful, because then I know they'll be considering our kinds of solutions. And up until that moment, what I'll assume is that they're all behind the scenes, trying to collect as big of a facial recognition database as possible. And that would be the downside. That's the scary scenario. That's the thing I have to stay scared of, because it's what gets me up in the morning to keep trying to build out what we're trying to do.